Hello, and welcome to a new DCS tutorial series I will be doing on the Mission Editor. In this series, we will be covering all the ins and outs of the DCS Mission Editor. To get started, we will start with basic mission creation and move on to more advanced techniques as the series progresses. Along the way, I will share some of the tips and tricks I've learned using the DCS Mission Editor. The first thing I like to do before I start with mission creation is to ensure that the folder structure is more manageable. Within the DCS Saved Games folder on your system, you will find the Missions folder. Here you can see I have organized my folder so that it's easier to find things within the editor. Keeping this organized can be a huge time saver as you make more and more missions. Now let's dive in. The mission editor can be found on the right side of the main screen within DCS. Once clicked, you will get this window. Here you can see most things are grayed out as we have not yet loaded a map. So for now, let's create a new mission. Now we have the coalitions window. Here you can set up the red, neutral, and blue sides. At the top, you can select pre-configured presets. For this mission, I'm going to use modern, and on the left side, I will use the Caucasus map. Don't worry if you don't get the coalitions right. We can always change them later during mission creation. Now we have the full DCS mission editor. At the top is the system bar where you will find your menus. We will go over these in more detail as we use them. On the left is the toolbar where shortcuts for commonly used items are, and at the bottom is the information bar. When things are selected, you will also get a properties window on the right side. We'll cover everything in these areas as we use them, but if you want to learn more about them, you can always look them up in the DCS User's Manual. However, this manual is quite out of date, so some things will not be relevant. Now we have a blank canvas to create a mission from. For the purpose of this series, we are going to make a simple convoy hunt for a carrier group to attack, and as the series progresses, we will continually add to it. Before we get too far into mission creation, let's take a quick look at some of the shortcuts we can use within the mission editor to speed up the process. Now let's set up the main parameters of the mission. We'll start with the mission section of the toolbar on the left and just move through each section. First is the briefing. At the top, you can put the name of your sortie. Below that is the red and blue coalitions. You cannot edit these. Next up is the briefing images panel. Just to demonstrate, I have made 6 simple images to show how these work. Here you can add images for red, blue, and neutral. A good general size for these images is 512 by 512. Now we can add a situation brief, red tasks, blue tasks, and neutral tasks. I'm going to keep this simple for now, but we can always update these later. With that done, let's move on to weather. Here we can set the start time, date, and weather properties. I'm going for a morning launch in the winter of 2010. The month you pick will change the season of the map. For this mission, I will pick January to make it winter. You can expand the sun and moon tab to get better details on sunrise and sunset. I am going to set this mission to start just before sunrise. For now, we are just going to use static weather as it is a bit simpler to set up. I'm going to start by going to the bottom and loading a preset weather condition. I'm not sure why, but currently the save feature doesn't seem to be working. Let's load the winter clouds and wind preset, and then we'll adjust it from there. Make sure to hit the load icon next to the preset in order for the weather preset to take effect. Now you can modify these values if you wish. This will not change the original preset. As for the fog and dust settings, I've had varied success with these, so normally I don't use them, but feel free to change them and see how they affect your mission. Once you're happy with the weather settings, you can close this tab. Next up in the mission section is the trigger and mission goals. We won't be working with these in this tutorial, so let's move on to battlefield commanders. I personally like to check pilot can control vehicles and add at least 1 game master slot. As your missions get more advanced, you might want to add more slots or even assign passwords to those slots. Next up, we can set up our mission options. Tooltips will pop up if you hover over any of these items if the options seem confusing. I normally like to have Fog of War on, Labels off, Padlock off, and Battle Damage Assessment on. However, you can change these to suit your mission needs. And finally, if we need to, we can change the coalitions again. For now, what we have will work. Now let's place our carrier group in the mission. We can change some of its properties before we place the ship on the map. I would recommend using a simple but effective naming convention. As you add more groups, it can quickly get out of control, so taking an extra second or two here can save you some headache down the road. It's important to note that no two groups can have the same name, and all units must have unique names as well. Below the name, you can also add a custom Lua code condition. For now, we won't be doing anything here. Next to that, you can change the percentage chance of this unit spawning. This is a quick way of mixing up a mission with units that don't always spawn. This can be used to add a bit of replayability to your missions, as they will be different every time they are loaded. Under that, you can change the coalition if needed, and next to that is the Combat All button. This filters your coalition list to show only the red and blue or all countries. Normally I leave this on combat. Next up is the unit section, which is currently unavailable because we haven't placed the unit yet. Under that is the category and type of unit we are placing. For this, I want the carrier CVN 73 George Washington. Next up, we can change the unit name if needed. By default, it uses the group name with a number added to it. This usually works fine, so I stay with this convention. Further down, we have 6 checkboxes we can toggle. We'll go over all of these in more detail when we start using them. Don't worry if you make a mistake here, all of these values can be changed once you place the item on the map. Now let's place the group, and you'll see that there are more options that unlock. Before we go much further, I'm going to change the icon style to Russian as I find them easier to work with. If we zoom in all the way, we will see our carrier. If you don't see it, use the Show Models toggle at the bottom of the information bar to toggle them on and off. Now we can add waypoints and modify more properties of the group. Let's start with a short route for the group and modify the speed. Remember that carriers will steam into the wind for launches and will have an offset when recovering. There are scripts out there that will automate this, but for a simple mission you can achieve it with waypoints. For the first waypoint, I want the launch window to be about 30 minutes, and then we'll have the carrier turn and do a recovery for 1 hour. This should be all we need for the mission, but we'll put an advanced waypoint command in to return to waypoint 1 just in case the mission runs long. Now let's set up the carrier TACAN, ICLS, and Link 4. It is important to get this right or your aircraft systems won't be able to find the carrier or look at the ILS. For the TACAN, you can set the name, channel, call sign, and most importantly, what unit it is assigned to. Do the same for the ICLS and Link 4, again making sure you assign them to your carrier. Now your carrier is set up to launch and recover, and the TACAN, ICLS, and Link 4 should be discoverable by your capable aircraft. A carrier by itself is pretty boring, so let's add some ships to the group and make it feel more like a carrier battle group. A typical group will have 4 to 6 destroyers and a cruiser along with support vessels. You can add and remove units by using the buttons in the unit section of the group properties. First we'll add 1 destroyer, then press it 3 more times for a total of 4 destroyers. Now we'll add 1 cruiser. As for support vessels, we are pretty limited, so we'll leave that out for now. Now let's position them to look more like an actual group. As you can see, now we also have rings on the map. These are detection and engagement circles. They are supposed to be able to be toggled on and off on the top right of the systems bar, but it seems to only work in-game on the F10 map right now. Now that our carrier group is set up, let's place an F-18 group on the map. Again, we can modify some of these before placing the group. And once the group is placed, you will see we have more options, even more than we did with the ship. Let's set the call sign, tail number, and frequencies now that we have it placed. Also be sure to set it to a client or player slot. I usually add 1 waypoint before setting it to takeoff to make it a bit easier to select once it snaps to the carrier. Now we can go back to waypoint 0 and set it to takeoff. You can choose takeoff from ramp, takeoff from runway, or takeoff from parking hot depending on your personal preferences. Or you can even have it start in the air. Similar to how we place the carrier and aircraft, let's get a convoy placed on a map. We'll place it at Sakumi and have it driving on the road between Sakumi and Sanaki. Do not forget to set the coalition to one of the red countries so that it is considered an enemy. And now we can set the rest of the properties of this group. After placing the group, let's set its type to on-road. With this selected, the group will try to stay on the roads while traveling between waypoints. Also, as we add additional waypoints, they will also snap to the road. Let's activate hide on map so that you can't see it on the F10 map. Now we can utilize the units list and toggle show hidden units. This window can be very helpful for not only showing and hiding groups, but also finding or filtering groups that you have placed on the map. Now let's add a few more units to the convoy. You can view units by clicking on the payload tab of the group. This will allow you to quickly see what you are working with, as sometimes the descriptions are not very good in the drop-down menus. This convoy is looking pretty good for now, so let's continue. You can add and remove waypoints and experiment with the route as needed to make the convoy more interesting. We'll have it stop somewhere around the 2-hour mark, and this will be our imaginary front line. Once you're happy with your convoy route, let's add some more points to our F-18 so that they can see where to patrol to find the convoy. Properties from your current waypoint will carry over to the next waypoint you create. You can utilize this to save a bit of time if altitudes and speeds are not going to change much. And we'll also add one last waypoint for landing. With that all set up, let's go ahead and set up the armament and livery of our F-18. As you can see, the aircraft task is currently set to cap. Let's change that to ground attack and create a new loadout specific for our mission. Once you're happy with your loadout, let's go ahead and add a wingman so you're not flying alone. I recommend doing this only after you have everything else set up so that everything will carry over to the wingman. However, if you want to change his loadout to be different from yours, you can do that as well. Next up, we can start to make the mission feel more alive, but that will be for next episode, where we will be getting into more advanced features of the mission editor, such as late activation, triggers, static objects, and even more group properties. If you made it this far, leave a like and consider subscribing. If you have more questions or want to learn more, hit me up in Discord. The link to my Discord server is down in the description. Hope you enjoyed the video and thanks for watching.